Welcome to I'm Listening, a live 2-hour in-depth conversation on the state of our individual and collective mental health in the days of COVID-19, social change and upheaval, and the events of 2020. Let's hear from some of our guests who've been very open about their own mental journeys. Here's pop superstar and singer-songwriter Julia Michaels on seeking therapy to deal with her anxiety attacks.
The biggest takeaway I took from therapy is almost everything comes from childhood trauma. I told my dad how I had started going to therapy, and he saw such a big change in me. He was like, you inspired me. I never would have gone to therapy if I wouldn't have seen the way that it's helped you.
Judah Akers from alternative band Judah and the Lion talks about how he is opening the conversation of mental health impacts regarding social change and awareness.
Everybody is talking about the racial stuff. I have a lot of white friends. I have a lot of black friends. We're talking about it. For whatever reason, those conversations have felt a little bit too awkward to bring up maybe, or not want to address, or not even want to ask my black friend, like, how are you feeling? Have I offended you in any way in our friendship? In what ways could I get better as a white male? And so having those conversations, I think, will be inevitably the momentum that takes us to actual change, actual equality.
Brandon Brooks, guard for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, who has stress-related anxiety disorder, and his tips for coping with it.
Just because you have everything, doesn't mean that, you won't have any problems. So, first and foremost, just seek help, man. Nobody's gonna, fault you for that. That's one of the biggest things that helped me out is, using my resources and, gain a better understanding to what this is, because I never was educated on it. I never knew much about it.
From one of the best-selling groups of the 20th century, this is Chili from TLC, with how the group addressed self-image and insecurities.
We told a few stories in Unpretty because, people experience so many different things. What you feel about yourself inside or outside. I mean, we all have some level of insecurities, but ultimately it is about embracing everything and being okay with how you look and what your shape is like. What I promote all the time is just good health. If you take care of your body, as you get older, you will find that it will take care of you.
Musician, raconteur, driving force of the legendary Motley Crue, and part of the new film Snow Babies, which tackles the subject of addiction, Nikki Sixx.
My wife calls me the analogy king, so I'm going to give you an analogy. If you want to run a race, and you get out there on the track, you're not in shape, you don't know how to eat for it, without having the tools, somebody to say, man, let me help you, I'm an experienced runner. They get the tools. That's what we're trying to do, is give some tools so people can run the race towards recovery.
Producer, hip-hop artist, and philanthropist G-Eazy talks about the mental toll the pandemic is taking on us.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I remember a lot of people saying, the saddest thing about this would be if we don't change through this. So many of my friends I see would, all of a sudden became avid runners or started eating well, or, and there'd be days where I felt like I wasn't doing enough, or I wasn't making enough change, or I hadn't, I'd wasted time. Even though we live in a day and age where constant comparison to each other is inevitable, you're living your own life and time goes in one way, so just take it day by day and take baby steps.
And now, from the BJ and Migs Morning Show on KISW Seattle, a mental health advocate and firm believer in therapy, BJ Shea, along with licensed clinical psychologist, the CEO of NowMattersNow.org, recent contributor to CBS Sunday Morning, and a leading researcher working to develop programs to change how we approach mental health, Dr. Ursula Whiteside. Welcome to I'm Listening.
And I am BJ Shea, and it is an honor to be once again hosting I'm Listening with Dr. Ursula Whiteside. We want to thank you all for joining us this live 2-hour journey that we are embarking upon, because we are continuing this goal that we started 4 years ago, and that is ending the stigma of talking about mental health and suicide prevention. And we want to share a few things with you here at the top of the show. First of all, you can call us directly in the studio, and you can share your experiences. The number is 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283. We would love to hear from you, because ultimately, talk has the power to save lives. So you can call us at 1-800-520-9283. You can also reach out to us on social media by following at imlistening_org. And of course, you can visit our website, imlistening.org, for all sorts of resources. And you can also share your stories there. And more importantly, if you are in a crisis or know someone who is and need immediate help, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Dr. Whiteside, good to have you back with me again. It's an understatement to say that 2020 has been just an extremely challenging year so far. We've got, of course, our maneuvering through this global crisis in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have all been sheltering in place. We've been wearing masks. Then the economic implications, the social equity and justice movement, wildfires in the West, an increase in catastrophic storms affecting the South. So many things that have the potential to affect our mental health. And singularly, one of them would be, okay, that's going to be hard for me. We've got all of these. And how is the collective mental health of the U.S. right now?
Thanks, BJ. Yeah, well, in a nutshell, not so good. There are indeed regular pockets of hope in our communities, like the normalcy of getting to watch some of our favorite teams again, and or the 60,000 people that silently marched through Seattle to support Black Lives Matter. But, and this big but, our day-to-day life is full of uncertainty. And many are dealing with disappointment and despair about the state of the world, and that's taking a toll. So according to the CDC, we're seeing rates of anxiety and depression 3 to 4 times that of last year. So 30% of us are experiencing depression or anxiety. 25% of us have some type of trauma or stress disorder due to the pandemic. And almost 15% have started or increased use of substances to cope with COVID. And when it comes to suicide, things have also gotten a lot worse. So 10%. 10% of people said that they seriously considered suicide in the past 30 days. That's 1 in 10 Americans intensely thinking about suicide. And we're seeing that it's even worse for some groups. So 1 in 4 young adults are thinking seriously about suicide every month, 15 to 20% of Hispanics and Black Americans. And also, essential workers and unpaid caregivers are also seeing steep increases in suicidal thoughts. What we know is that the vast, vast majority of us who have suicidal thoughts will not go on to kill ourselves. And that's important for many reasons, especially if you're somebody who's listening today and you've had suicidal thoughts. It's important to take it seriously, but it does not mean that you will kill yourself or that suicide is inevitable in any way.
And I love the fact that it's pointed out that this is a time where many of us, if not all of us, are in a state of high anxiety, and it's real. I mean, it's definitely real. COVID in itself, it is real, and tools are available to deal with these kind of mental health issues that we have. And that's what I love about this. Sure, things are definitely not the greatest they could be right now. Things are tough for a lot of folks, but there are things that we can do. And what would you say people could do to help them out in this situation?
Well, this is my favorite thing to talk about. So let's talk about 2 tools briefly. You can learn more about these at nowmattersnow.org. So both interact with your vagus nerve, and that communicates between your brain and your major organs. If you can affect that nerve, you can affect your mental state. So the first is called paced breathing. This is where you make your exhale longer than your inhale and gradually lengthen both of those. So for example, you might inhale to a count of 5 and exhale to a count of 7. You might not know it, but when you exhale, your heart rate actually slows down. The other tool is using cold. By putting your face in very cold water or by using ice packs on the back of your neck or on your forehead and under your eyes, you can really slow anxiety down. I've done this while measuring my heart rate using a Fitbit, and I watched my heart rate go from the 120s to the 60s. It's really remarkable. If you have a significant health problem, you want to check with a healthcare provider, but I can't overemphasize how powerful and fast-acting this tool is. It's ideal for when there's real intense crisis going on.
Thank you, Dr. Whiteside. We're going to jump right in and hear some of our guests and to take your calls. Again, you can reach us in studio at 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283. Our first guest is a founding member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band who has sold over 100 million albums worldwide and won just about every award imaginable. Duff McKagan, bassist for Guns N' Roses. And Duff spoke with Ryan Castle from 99.9 KISW in Seattle about how he's dealing with 2020, COVID, social conflict, and equal justice.
The working out is key. In my case, to the depression that I've now had 2 separate episodes of, I would force myself, even though I couldn't drive, couldn't walk, into the gym. And I forced myself just to do 100 push-ups, and I would have some peace in there. And you have to get out. You got to run. even if you run just around your block, you're too far from home. But what I gained from my martial art, my particular sort of martial art, is there's a meditation. It's called concentration meditation. And you build yourself a place to go. You build this safe house. And you actually build this house. And mine, it happens to be down in the bottom of this meadow. And it might sound corny, but it's not, because it's saved my ass a million times. And at first, it takes you a long time to get there. You can't listen to the cars whirling by outside, or the phone ringing, or any other voices in your head, or what you did earlier that day, or something looming that night. You have to be completely into your meditation and go to your safe place that you've built yourself. And you have different things. I have different things in this house. I have different herbs. I might need to be calmed. I might need some reinforcement. I might need patience. And I use the herbs I have in this house, and I drink it down with clean water. And I do it's a whole thing that I can't really explain to you in 3 minutes, but eventually became stronger and stronger, and I could get there quicker and quicker. And at some times, I was in a situation with business where I could turn around in about 3 seconds. I could be in my house. I could go through and calm myself down, or get what I needed, and be in and out of it in 20 seconds. So I've been able to build this concentration meditation place to go. And if I have a panic attack, I instantly go there and know that I'm going to be okay, get through it. And it's helped me innumerable times.
If you're just joining us, I'm BJ Shea, and this is I'm Listening. On the way, we're going to hear from Luke Combs, Louis Capaldi, Alanis Morissette, DJ Khaled, Jon Bon Jovi, and many more. And don't forget, you can call us in studio and share your thoughts, questions. You can share your experiences, all with us at 1-800-520-9283. Our next guest has over 45 billion streams to her name, along with 45 million albums sold worldwide, and she's a new mom. Katy Perry's new album, Smile, is out now, and Katy spoke with Kennedy from Mix 1041 in Boston about how her depression and mental health struggles are affecting her and how she's coping during this very different 2020.
I grew up in an atmosphere that, mental health didn't exist. I remember I didn't believe in ADD. I told a kid in 6th grade, I was like, that's a cop-out. You don't have ADD. And he literally socked me in the mouth. Obviously, he was definitely struggling. And I just think there's a lot of natural tools to be able to use to combat depression and anxiety. And, when I turn to my tools, I do things like meditation and conversation with other friends, taking the tabooness out of it. I went through a super journey in the last 2 years, and that's what this record is about. And so it's a wonderful touchstone for me. Even I say in the thank yous, I say to myself, I don't know if I'm going to be depressed again. I don't know if I'm going to go through it, but I have this touchstone to remind me that I came out the other end. I lived. And it's almost like, Katy, remind yourself you can get through it. If you were struggling pre-pandemic with anxiety or depression, we've all had to face a lot of things, all of us, and that's really hard. But I do believe that you can get through it. It's not always easy, but you can.
You can find out more about today's show along with more resources at imlistening.org. Dr. Whiteside, there is no doubt that COVID-19 is affecting us on multiple levels. And so far, we've heard from Duff, McKagan, Katy Perry, that they're using tools to help them get through these troubling and turbulent times. Are there other things, and you've even mentioned some stuff as well, are there other things that we can do to cope with what we're dealing with this year?
Yeah, one of the things that we can think about is the difference between pain and suffering. A lot of times we don't differentiate these two things. The first, pain, that's inevitable. That's going to be part of life. But the second, suffering, we create our own suffering. It's not inevitable. So especially this last week, for example, some folks have been saying Justice RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has died. So all is hopeless. If we break that sentence down, RGB has died, that's the pain part. All is hopeless, that's the second part, that's the suffering that gets added. We can't currently change the present facts, even if we don't like them. So, what do I mean? We can prevent suffering by practicing something called radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is not approval, it's not giving up. What it is complete and total acceptance of the reality, the facts of the reality with our mind, body, and spirit. When we radically accept things that are out of our control, we prevent unhappiness and bitterness and anger and sadness. Radical acceptance frees up energy that we would otherwise spend fighting reality. And it helps us to cope effectively with the situation and take care of ourselves, having that additional energy. So Barack Obama once said, I think is the end of the world. Nothing's the end of the world until the end of the world. And I'm a big fan of that and radical acceptance.
I love that because I was told that once during a therapy session. I remember my therapist said, BJ, you cannot avoid pain in this world. But you know what? You can create all the suffering you want. And,
Ain't that the truth?
And when I didn't understand it at first, but it was like, oh, wait, you mean I'm the one doing the suffering? He said, yeah, you're doing all that on your own. You can't avoid pain, but you're the one that makes the suffering. And boy, that does make a difference. It really does. I appreciate that, Dr. Whiteside. This is the segment that I really love. I love this because, man, especially now where people feel like they're alone or they feel like there's an us versus them mentality, we take your calls, we read your emails, and for me, I never feel more together and more unified when I hear from you and read what you have to say. I feel I've never felt closer to human beings than when we do this segment, so I'm happy to get into this. And you can call us at 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283. Let's go to Diane on line 4. Diane, you are on I'm Listening.
This is Sean from East Ridge, the Wild Thing.
Oh, really?
And
hold on a second, Sean. I'm not sure. I want to make sure we get to Diane first, if we can. Is she available? Because I don't want to let her go. All right. Well, this is Sean. He said. I think. All right, Sean. You know what? We'll put you back on, sir. All right. No, Sean's gone too. All right. Well. All right. There we go. Sorry about that, Diane. If we didn't get to you. Again, the number is 800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283 if you'd like to join us. This comes from Shane. Shane says, and you can email us, you can contact us through imlistening.org like Shane did. Shane says, I'm a first responder and I suffer from depression. I think a lot of first responders, and I feel like what they do is because of what they feel is because of what we see, and a lot of first responders go with this. And Shane says, I hate to see a first responder suffering from depression and PTSD. It is sad. And we never think about the folks that are especially with everybody that has been first responders in the line of our frontline defense for COVID. I mean, Dr. Whiteside, that is tough to think that they're suffering when they're helping us. Right.
And the more work they do, the more trauma that they actually experience. So it's this consistent trauma on a regular basis. And some of our folks who are first responders are also the least likely to reach out for help. But the good news is that PTSD is very treatable. There are evidence-based treatments, exposure therapy that can really knock out a lot of the struggles around this. So we encourage people to do the work, to seek therapy, to address the trauma. It doesn't have to be something you live with your whole life.
Thank you, Dr. Whiteside. And again, if you want to reach us, you can get us at 800-520-9283. That's 800-520-9283. And if you want to send us any sort of communication on the socials, anything else, you can go to imlistening.org to get all that information. We've got a message here from Jessica. She says, hi, I've been dealing with depression and anxiety for 2 years. It's been a really bad subject to talk about, considering I've never really talked about it before. Very few select people know about it, and I'm trying to better myself, but I don't really know how to, especially if I don't really have people to talk and talk with them about everything. I've never self-harmed, but have considered it. Dealing with mental health on top of school is absolute torture because school takes education to be first priority. But in my opinion, bettering yourself before you do homework is way more important. I'm trying, but I don't know the next step. I don't know what to do. I love this, Jessica, because and thank you for this. Dr. Whiteside, I read a lot of books, including Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina, who talks about how the way we do things in our life is so not great for the brain, like how we educate ourselves and even how we go to work and how we sleep and all these different things. And so Jessica doesn't know that actually, you know what, you may be onto something that you should take care of your mental health before anything else, even though society doesn't put that first.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Jessica, and I can just say I so relate. I remember sitting in a therapist's office for the first time, just finding it excruciating to sit there because I was so ashamed. And that's like feels like a million miles ago, but I remember what it's like. And what you did right now, just putting it on paper, sending it to us, that's a huge step, right? And because you've done that, it's going to be a tiny bit easier the time when you decide to say it to somebody else out loud. But you are in good company. We know that the rates of depression and anxiety are so high that you are so not alone. And there's no reason to have real shame about this. You want to talk to someone you trust and who you feel comfortable with. That's a great place to start, especially if it's somebody who's struggled themselves. So thank you so much for writing in.
We've got a message from Pat. Pat said, 2 weeks ago, my life changed forever. This is when my loving husband and father of my children took his own life. I still can't say the S word because I still can't believe he did this. Every night I go to bed praying that I will wake up in the morning and this will all be a bad dream. I want to be mad at him, but I am too sad to be mad. I am so confused. I'm trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. It is hard to comfort my children when I can't understand this. And Dr. Whiteside, I know that is a level of expertise that you have with NowMattersNow.org and all the great work you've done with suicide awareness and suicide prevention. Pat's in a tough place, and if I were her friend, I wouldn't know what to say, but I'd want to say something or at least be helpful.
Right. I mean, one of the things about losing someone to suicide is we don't know what to do, and there's a lot of guilt and sometimes real suffering, obviously, that happens in this situation. So one of the resources that you can go to is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. That's AFSP.org, and they have resources for people who are really struggling with this. I know when I read your message, my heart just dropped and went out to you. One of the things that when you have children in your life, when they've lost a parent, for example, it's really important to let them know what happened, to not try and hide that from them, and also to help them get mental health therapy to get through this. So please get support. There are support groups for people who've lost people to suicide. And again, you can go to afsp.org to learn more.
Julie sends us a message saying that my first husband took his life after the death of our baby. I thought that after that I would recognize the signs, but about 20 years after that my best friend's fiance took his life after losing his son to a motorcycle accident. I didn't really think about him killing himself until he was suddenly happy. But I doubted my intuition. My husband's 15-year-old cousin took his life. Today I just learned a friend attempted to take his life, a life that is good, a life that most people would want. That just shows you how much pain he has been in and never told anyone in fear that maybe they would think he was weak. He needs to be easy and accessible to get. And she says help needs to be easy and affordable to get. We need to figure something out. There's so many things that swirl around, Dr. Whiteside, when it comes to when suicide happens in somebody's sphere. And everyone sort of thinks that they should know or thinks that it should have been preventable. And I've seen people be angry. I have a relative that once called another relative of ours a coward because we lost him to suicide. And it's just that kind of word. It's like coward. People just don't seem to understand how to deal with the feelings of being a suicide survivor.
Yeah. And, there's not any emotion that isn't normal around suicide. Anger is normal. Sadness is normal. Fear is normal. Like, could this happen to me? Is this, who knows at this point? Like, those emotions are all normal. And then what you do with them is the next step that's really important. One of the things you talked about is access to low-cost therapy. One resource that you can check out is openpathcollective.org. Openpathcollective.org, and they have lists of therapists who will see people for lower fees. That's one place to check out. But many people are having suicidal thoughts and not dying. And just because you've had them doesn't mean it's inevitable. And in fact, it's definitely not inevitable. So thanks for your message.
And really, this is what we're doing today. We are talking, because getting these messages, and it's such an amazing thing to realize how many people are dealing with mental health issues. I would say pretty much everybody. I mean, I look in the mirror and go, well, I know what I'm doing. And I have such empathy now that I know that everybody's going through this, and talking about it is the difference, because it is a subject that people were told not to talk about. And I love that I'm Listening does that. And Dr. Whiteside, thank you so much for doing all that you do, being willing to sit here with me and just give people the opportunity to do just that, to talk about mental health. It is so, so important. And we would love to hear from you at 800-520-9283. That's 800-520-9283. And this is I'm Listening. Our next guest is Dr. Michael Lindsay. Dr. Lindsay is the executive director of the MC Silver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research at NYU. Also, he leads a group of experts supporting the Congressional Black Caucus Emergency Task Force on Black Youth Suicide and Mental Health. Dr. Lindsay spoke with Riggs from 103.7 KISS FM in Milwaukee about the impacts of the coronavirus and social equity movement on youth in impoverished communities.
I think that trusted entities within the Black community, trusted voices become really important to, give them a sense of the opportunity to be able to then identify people who might be struggling with a mental health issue. Because if you create a sort of soft landing, if you will, for which to sort of talk about these issues, if you open up the door in destigmatizing ways to have these conversations, then it might have the effect of compelling a person to talk about it. And I think entities in the community that are trusted and valued are really, really important. And I want to say this, though. I think that stigma is also instructive of the historical kinds of experiences that people of color have had when they interacted with mental health systems, right? The onus also has to be on systems that provide services to be open, to be culturally competent in ways that will invite, in meaningful ways, people of color who have traditionally been marginalized or disconnected from those kinds of treatments, what ushers them into the door. The onus is also on mental health services and professionals to ensure that they are creating experiences that are welcoming, that are destigmatizing in ways that are going to bridge that gap.
Dr. Whiteside, there's no doubt that stress must be at an all-time high, and the social justice movement, equality movement, with going on across this country, along with everything else that's happening in 2020, stress is got to be through the roof. And I do love the fact that we are talking about this, and as Dr. Lindsay mentioned, the stigma of talking about mental health, which really, I mean, if that couldn't be furthest from the truth, like mental health is so important, there shouldn't be a stigma about that at all. It leads to so much good.
Yeah. And, for some cultural groups, there is greater stigma in talking about mental health. For Black Americans, though, some don't talk about it because, like Dr. Lindsay said, it hasn't been helpful. Misdiagnosis is a real problem. So a white teen with irritability gets a depression diagnosis, and a Black teen gets labeled disruptive. For Black Americans, it can be hard to access healthcare, get diagnosed correctly, and find a therapist who can relate to them. Just 4% of psychologists in the U.S. are Black. But some resources for Black Americans. There is a 1-800 number for Black mental health, and you can find more about that on the website callblackline.com. That's callblackline.com. You can also check out a subreddit on Reddit called Black Mental Health that has a number of great resources. And finally, you can Google Psychology Today Black Therapists to find a Black therapist.
Yeah, it's so important. I can't imagine what it would be like if I were going for the treatment that I went for and they would not actually even diagnose me properly. They would be, because of the color of my skin. That's just unbelievable to my mind. So I am so happy that the word is getting out there that everybody should get equal treatment when it comes to mental health. That is fantastic. It does seem like unacknowledged pain can really cause so much trauma, and of course a big leader into depression, even suicide, and that definitely seems relevant to what's going on in our country today. That's a fact. And injustice, long history of injustice in our country, and you talk about being unseen and how that can drive mental health problems.
Yes. So George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on, right? And in Black and Native communities, mental health challenges naturally result from witnessing and experiencing systemic racism. You see other countries that publicly and consistently acknowledge historical trauma. Like if you go to a ceremony in Australia or Canada, for example, they acknowledge the tribal lands that they're on. Like right now, where we're at in Seattle, we're on the land of Duwamish people. There is something that happens to our brains when painful things aren't acknowledged. And for some, it can be more painful than the original harm in the first place. It can keep people really stuck. So people are literally crying out, saying, "This is killing me," and the least we can do is not further traumatize them by denying their pain.
Once again, I'm BJ Shea, along with Dr. Ursula Whiteside, and this is I'm Listening. And remember, it's okay to not be okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you'd like to contribute to the show, please give us a call at 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283. And you can find out more about today's show along with many resources at imlistening.org. And if you feel like you need help immediately, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Our next guest has struggled with anxiety attacks for some time. In his home of Scotland, he's the Best New Artist and Song of the Year winner. He has the #1 pop song in America right now called Before You Go, which is about the loss of his aunt to suicide. Louis Capaldi spoke with Julia from Chicago's B96 on the stigma of talking about mental health.
The stigma doesn't just come from people not wanting to talk about it because it's taboo. Like, the stigma can come from, like, I didn't feel it was I kind of had this weird thing in my head that no one put there. I just kind of had myself that it wouldn't be appropriate for a pop song that to be played. Like, do you know what I mean? That would maybe be played on radio at some point, because I felt like I didn't want to overstep my mark in any way. Which I think with mental health as well, from the perspective of someone who's maybe struggling with it themselves, like maybe they feel like they're overstepping a mark to speak about it with someone. They don't want to burden someone else with it or whatever. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to put your weight on someone else. But I think that, I mean, I don't know the answer to reducing stigma, but I did feel sort of like, I didn't feel proud when I put it out or when I finished it, but when I got people messaging me about it and coming up to me, and if I was in a bar somewhere and someone just came up randomly and spoke to me about it, I'd be like, it's not weird, but it's so like strange that this is like, I'm still like, but nice strange that someone who I don't know felt comfortable enough to come and talk to me about it because I had written this song.
I have such hope for the future when I hear folks like Louis Capaldi openly talking about his anxieties and even going so far as to vocalize his concerns that even at his young age are still so prevalent when it comes to addressing the stigma of talking about how we're doing. There's no doubt that we have a ways to go, but I really think we're making progress. And as a guy who's absolutely seen the benefits of therapy firsthand, I am all for it. Our next guest is arguably the single biggest country music artist in America today. He made history with his first 7 singles going to #1. His new album, What You See Ain't Always What You Get, comes out October 26th. He just won ACM Male Artist of the Year and Album of the Year. And Luke Combs spoke with us about his own journey suffering with anxiety and how he's coping with it, especially with so much constant change in 2020.
I am somebody who has struggled with anxiety a lot in my past. It's been actually a really huge part of my life. So a couple ways or tools, I guess you would say, to maintain my mental health is making myself aware to the things that I know I'm prone to. I think information is key for things like that, and knowing what you're dealing with and how they operate. has been one of the biggest things for me, and knowing when maybe some of those things that are happening to you, being aware or cognizant of the way your mind works in certain situations has been the most important thing for me. One way I'm staying connected during these times is just, giving people a ring on the phone. Obviously, texting is easy. I play Xbox with some folks, and that's a good way to just kind of to chat about whatever and connect over a common cause, But just hearing somebody's voice can be really comforting in a time like this. I think anybody could feel pressure to get a lot done during these times, but I don't think that's any different than everyday life. So I think just dealing with those things as they come is important. Finding a good balance, whether you're in quarantine or not, is really important. I think keeping your mind quiet, staying focused, you can do too much of that sometimes. You can try to put pressure on yourself to get a lot done is a tactic that I think a lot of people use to try to keep their mind off things. And that can also be a negative thing. But what I've done is like I said, just trying to find that balance of, being productive and making use of your day, but also, giving yourself time to breathe.
Luke Combs, just like Louis Capaldi a moment ago, is so open about his own anxiety issues. It's so encouraging to hear. And it's also very telling that no matter your status or your position in life, no one is immune to mental health issues, especially when we're all dealing with the fear and stress associated with the unknowns, the coronavirus, potential vaccines, and everything else is going on this year. Dr. Whiteside, one thing I'm wondering is, are you seeing now finally that more people might be more willing to discuss mental health issues?
Yeah. One thing about the coronavirus is that we are in this together, and so many of our daily norms have changed. And I think that that's an opportunity to push back on the norms that have been preventing people from talking about mental health and addiction. What is in many ways especially new is that more and more people are talking about suicide. So Lady Gaga recently, for example, has come out about her own experiences. At times she's had suicidal thoughts on a daily basis. And she talks a great deal about coping skills from DBT, which we'll talk about later on this show. If we could combine forces and create a united front of people talking not only about having had suicidal thoughts, but also about how they got through it, there could be a landslide of change. And I think that's the direction we're going.
1-800-520-9283. That is the number if you'd like to reach us in studio and talk with us today. 1-800-520-9283. Dr. Whiteside, let's talk about anxiety disorders. This is something I am very, very familiar with. And I think maybe it might be one of the most common mental health issues a lot of us deal with. Could you break it down for us? Also give us some recommendations, some tools to use when we are in that state, feeling anxious.
You bet. Yeah. So there's the anxiety that shows up for most people, like the new job, public speaking, first date. Then there is that type of anxiety that paralyzes you and prevents you from living your life. That's what we're talking about. Anxiety disorders are among the most common mental health disorders. And in the U.S., they affect about 20% of adults and 30% of young people. Some of the symptoms, so you can check in with yourself, are feeling restless and wound up, having hyperactivity, trouble sleeping, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, irritability, muscle tension, and difficulty controlling your feelings of worry. When these symptoms impair your life, you might have an anxiety disorder, and it's important to seek treatment. There is a coping tool called opposite action that's acting differently than the way that you feel, and acting opposite to anxious urges is powerful. So for an example, you're in the grocery store and it's really crowded and you start to feel real panicked. You want to instead resist the urge to escape. Do the opposite. Make yourself stay for at least 2 minutes, and in your head say the things that you see. I see the store clerk in the apron. I see the deli counter. I see turkey, beef, chicken. And then after 2 minutes, you may find that it's a little easier to stay.
1-800-520-983. That is the number. Let's get back to the phones and take your calls at 1-800-520-9283. That's how you can reach us in studio. Let's talk with Alex. Alex, you're on I'm Listening.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thank you, Alex. What do you have for us today?
All right. So I wanted to talk briefly. You had mentioned about anxiety disorders. I have family members that suffer from anxiety disorders. I suffer from OCD. I have some family members who suffer from anxiety, generalized anxiety. And although it's not an anxiety disorder, one of my other family members suffer from PTSD and depression. And I've had numerous suicide attempts. And it's put a strain on my family and I because we've been dealing with the ignorance of the family members, thinking it's not, it's nothing. And it's really been very stressing for me to have to advocate for others and for myself to say it's not an ignorant thing. It's an actual disorder. It's tantamount to a physical disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Ursula, what I have seen in these situations is, and Alex, thank you so much for your call. The idea that when somebody is faced with one of their family members going through a really, really difficult time, something on the level of an anxiety disorder, where I've seen the people just say, I don't want to take blame for this. I don't want to believe this is happening, because they're also going through whatever they're going through with this news. And unfortunately, they'll spit out something like, well, this is ignorant. And empathy is not present on either side. And it just seems to do, is there anything he could do, at least on his own end, to soothe himself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that happens a lot, right, is that especially with parents, when they have a kid who's suicidal, it's this, what did I do wrong? And it's very much focused on that as opposed to what the person is going through, what the kid's going through. I'm just so glad that you're here and that you survived, and I'm sorry for what you're facing. I mean, honestly, it's very hard to change family members. There are free online courses that people can take to better learn about how to support their friends and family. You can learn about one at nowmattersnow.org. But ultimately, having that within you to know that you don't necessarily need folks to be the support that you wish they could be, I think is really important. And so I'm so glad that you called in. Let's go to Rebecca. Rebecca, hi, you're on I'm Listening.
Hi, how's everybody today?
Oh, we're doing well, Rebecca. What do you have for us today?
Okay, I am basically the founder of Yap About It, Inc. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that provides access to free talk therapy to young people in need. And I just wanted to share my information in case there was anyone that found my contact information useful or wanted to support.
Yeah.
We're preparing for a campaign for colored children of deceased essential workers due to COVID-19. So we definitely want to be able to reach as many young people in need as possible. So if anyone knows of someone that lost a parent or guardian due to COVID, definitely reach out. My contact information is Rebecca with 2 C's at yapaboutit.org. And
great.
Yeah.
How do you spell that, Yap About It?
YAPAOABOUT, it.org.
Great.
To play on words like talk about it, yappity yap.
Yeah.
Rebecca, thank you so much for that. Man, if we can get to the kids, I mean, that is the future. If we can get to the kids and younger ages, teach them how to manage their mental health. Because I don't know about you, Ursula, but I think I started very, very late. I started in my 40s, even having the idea that maybe mental health could be managed. Imagine like that they teach it in schools. Kids who are toddlers could learn about mental health management and awareness. I think that's fantastic. Organizations like this exist.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Got a message from Andy. Andy said, I was diagnosed manic depressive when I was 25, and I try to stay strong. I go to therapy. I take my medications. But there are times when I still feel burnt out, stressed out, and like I want to give up. I work and I do things to keep myself occupied and keep my mind sharp, but it never seems to be enough. I have to say that social media doesn't help because it's like a game of keeping up with the Joneses. Everyone seems to have this perfect life, but I don't think that perfect life exists. I want to know if any of those people living that perfect life are anything like me and they are secretly struggling inside. Boy, that key word perfect, and Brene Brown's daring, she's got a great book with Daring Greatly. But she talks about perfection being such a trap, and the worst thing you could do for yourself is to try to be perfect. And so really, a perfect life, nobody really wants that because that's not good for your mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I just love that you said that because I'm sitting here thinking I'm the therapist and all those people whose lives look perfect, you're right. They are not perfect. So yes, it is true. And thanks for pointing that out. I think just making sure to be consistent about what you're doing and know that for some of us, including myself, there's just going to be hard times at times. And for me, knowing that can make it a little bit more tolerable, that instead of it being the end of the world, that we can move forward. Thanks again.
Anna also has sent us a message saying, I attempted suicide 4 years ago. I still struggle most days. I was in graduate school and trying to get my PhD, which I know I'm qualified for. Anxiety and depression issues made it harder to be as productive and lead to fellow grad students, and that led to fellow grad students harassing me. One coworker tried to tell me different ways to kill myself and posted on a public site the details of my attempt.
Oh, no.
I had to leave the program without the degree. Medicine and meditation help a lot. I just wish it was treated like any other illness. And boy, there's shame right there. You know, how can you not feel shame, which is also another big enemy of mental health?
Yeah, graduate programs, I mean, they're a special kind of animal. And the folks that go through them, you know, I'm one of those. We have pretty high standards, and we're not always forgiving, especially of ourselves. So, yeah, thanks for writing in.
Yeah, man. Gosh, if we could just be more empathetic and loving of anybody going through a tough time, it would be so helpful. Our next guest, sadly, is no stranger to loss and the spotlight. Her father, the late Chris Cornell, was lost to suicide in 2017 and is the driving inspiration for why the I'm Listening program and initiative started and continues today. Lily Cornell Silver started her own interview series, Mind Wide Open, on Instagram TV earlier this year. She is an outstanding supporter and mental health advocate, and recently met up with Ryan Castle from 99.9 KISW in Seattle, and they talked about how much everyone is struggling mentally through COVID-19 and the social equity and justice movement.
If anything, like, this process has shown me how much solidarity there is, that everybody's struggling right now to an extent, you know, and I think that's what, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was in so much shock and in kind of survival mode of like, how are we going to, you know, get through this? Like, where am I going to get toilet paper? Like, you know what I mean? And now people have kind of had the time to be like, wow, this is what we're going through. This is how I'm feeling about it, you know, and kind of have had that minute to breathe and be like, this is a lot. And no wonder I feel bad, because we're going through a global trauma, you know, we're all experiencing trauma right now. And so that's been, through this series, being able to find that solidarity of people. I'm really struggling too. And the pandemic is, you know, making it harder in these ways. And, you know, the structural supremacy is making it harder in these ways. And so that opening that conversation has been not only helpful to others, but immensely helpful to me, for sure.
Is social media inherently just bad for people's mental health? I mean, I know that we use it as a tool for good at times, but I mean,
Right.
is it just bad for people?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard because like I come from kind of the first generation where like we grew up with it, you know, like I had an Instagram at 13. Like I don't really know what my mental health would be like if I didn't have social media. I definitely know they can be easily abused. I think the thing about social media that can be super detrimental is the constant overload of information, constant overstimulation. You can't escape it. But that's not even just social media. That's kind of just a society we live in,
Sure.
the 24-hour news cycle. So I think honestly, it's like the best of the best is there. The worst of the worst is there. It depends on what you're looking for, you know, and you can, and my thing with this series has definitely been like, you know, using social media as a tool because it has that capacity to be used for good and to help your mental health if you're using it in the right way. It just takes some practice to get there.
I love what Lily is doing. Just fantastic things that she's doing with her show, Mind Wide Open. And Dr. Whiteside, I know that you actually had a chance to speak with Lily recently, and you have your own experience with suicide. I wonder if you would mind telling us a little bit about your own suicidal thoughts and intense emotional pain.
Yeah, of course. So for me, there are times when I really do struggle. I can have the thought, I don't want to be here. My head will be pounding. I can't sleep. And it literally feels like there's some kind of black abyss surrounding me. My brain's telling me things like it's not going to get better and I truly can't hack it. I would say it feels like I'm in a fire, or it's like I'm on fire emotionally. What I have to remember is that I don't want to die. I just want to feel differently. And that's a place I can work from. And the next thing I might do is to try some tools like paced breathing, cold water, radical acceptance, and opposite action.
And can you talk about how wanting to escape pain, which of course, I mean, it makes sense. People want to escape pain, but how sometimes that leads to some people considering things that they would never otherwise do?
Yes, I think many people can relate to being on fire with their emotions at some point in their life, when our emotions are just totally over the top intense, and it feels excruciating at times. Sometimes we think we would do anything to escape. And people just don't know what to do at that point, and sometimes they make choices they can't take back. Suicide, or taking too much drugs and alcohol, or getting in a huge fight. But there are things that we can do. There are steps we can take, using cold water on our face to put out an emotional fire. Don't make any important decisions for 24 to 48 hours. Stop using drugs and alcohol. And find someone else who can be with you and help you get through it. These steps are like a stop, drop, and roll for being on fire emotionally.
And since you talk about finding someone else to be with you, I think that does the person that is going to be with you, do they have to do anything but just be? I think that's the, sometimes people go, I don't know if this is enough. Should I say something? Should I do something? But is it just good enough that they just say that, even if they say nothing?
Yeah, especially if you tell them what would be helpful. I mean, really just saying, if you could just listen for a few minutes, that would be helpful. You could just sit with me, make a huge difference.
There was an article recently in Bloomberg that said that suicides in teens and young adults has jumped 57% in the last decade. I mean, that's just staggering. And I'm wondering, what about factors like COVID-19? Are they contributing to this statistic? I mean, is it maybe make it worse? What do we need to be doing? What do we have to do more of to bring that number down to save more lives?
Yeah, it's really shocking. And honestly, we don't know for sure what's happening. Especially with COVID, many of us are spending more time alone than ever with our phones. You know, heard Lily talking about this, and that can be a good thing. More music and art and sometimes social media, but those same outlets, especially for young people, can focus very intensely on emotional pain. Artists are doing this great thing, which is talking about issues of suicide, anxiety, and depression through their art. But we can get stuck with our feelings. So what's missing a lot of the times are the stories of how people got through things, how they survived. And that's why a growing number of people like Lily Cornell Silver and others are beginning to show through their art that not just only did they think about it, but how they actually got through it.
Our next guest is a superstar singer-songwriter, 7-time Grammy Award winner. Her album, Jagged Little Pill, just celebrated 25 years. I feel old. She just sold over 60 million albums worldwide, and she's a huge mental health advocate. Alanis Morissette spoke openly with Jane from Alice at 97.3 in San Francisco and tells us about the massive impact COVID-19, the wildfires, and the social justice movement is having on our psyche.
Chronic stress is trauma. You know, so I feel in some way we're in this cesspool of trauma in a way, because there's the chronic stress, of course, but on top of that, death, weird McKagan is happening, fires, being isolated from each other. You know, we need each other to stay alive. We knew that about babies, right? Babies die if they don't have love and connection and that attachment phase. But I would say the same is true for us as adults. If we don't have that, we're egregiously undertouched anyway as a society. So the fact that we're undertouched even more now, you know, so I'm just like, if you can just like, you know, non-sexually hold each other, touch each other. And self-care has always been really important to me. I haven't always been great at it. And I believe in the resilience of our beings. You know, I believe that our birthright is a general sense of well-being, dipping into dysregulation, dipping into the odd, you know, circumstantial depression, dipping into hormonal changes. I mean, there's so many, this miracle of a body and a psyche and our energetic beings are just so multitudinous in terms of biochemistry, certainly, but also just parts of us. You know, there's a part of me that loves being home during the pandemic. There's a part of me that hates not being able to travel and I'm going insane, you know, and there's a part of me that loves being a mom and it's what I was born to do. And another part of me that is completely depleted and doesn't, you know, so for me, it's the Richard Schwartz, IFS, Debbie Ford, Shadow, Carl Jung, modernized, talking to the parts, you know, talking to my depressed part, talking to my excited part. I ask these parts to talk with me. So this internal dialoguing, it can take 10 seconds. It can take 2 hours if we want to go for it. But for me, it's a really quick process of just saying, how are you trying to help? What wisdom do you have? What do you need me to do? What action can I take on your behalf?
Dr. Whiteside, I love this because Alanis and even Jewel talked about the concept of mindfulness, and that in order to be mindful, one needs to be present. This has, to me, been key in my life. And we have, of course, talked about this in the past, especially DBT therapy, and that mindfulness does play a major role in that therapy. Could you tell us a little bit more about DBT and that whole process?
Yeah, sure. So DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, is a type of mental health therapy, and it includes one-on-one therapy and group therapy and other things. The group therapy, though, is like a class. It focuses on learning and practicing new coping skills. We call these DBT skills. In this hour, we talked about some of the coping skills that were DBT skills, like paced breathing and cold water, radical acceptance. There are videos on Now Matters Now that cover these skills, so feel free to learn more there. But what's really foundational in this practice of DBT is the coping skill of mindfulness. It's sort of the foundation for all of the other coping skills. So mindfulness is putting your attention on the here and the now, and it's sort of watching your own thoughts from above, like being aware of what's going on in your head instead of just going along with whatever thoughts your brain comes up with. So for you, what percent of the day are you truly aware of your thoughts? And also, what percent of the day would you say you are owned by them? We know brains come up with all sorts of thoughts, and many of them are harmful, especially the thoughts that drive us to consider suicide. You and I are familiar, BJ, with some of the less useful thoughts that brains create.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Instead, mindfulness is about being intentional about what you are paying attention to. A lot of anxious thoughts are focused on the future, and depressed thoughts, they're focused on the past. Instead, with mindfulness, you're turning your attention to the here and the now and just focusing on the facts. When you're mindful, you remove judgment. Instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, with mindfulness, you would say, I feel this way. And instead of saying, when you have a thought like, I can't hack it, you would instead rephrase it and say something like, I'm having the thought, I can't hack it. So next you might add another thought like, what is something pleasant I can do right now? Or what is something I can do that would make me feel at least a tiny bit more confident? So you see that second part we added on is really focused on what else can I pay attention to, or what do I want to pay attention to? You often can't, and this is really important, you often can't control the first thought that comes into your mind, but with mindfulness, you can choose where your second, your third, or your fourth thought goes. And when it comes to pain, you can be mindful of that too. You can acknowledge painful emotions as they are happening. So you do not want to try and stuff pain. You can say to yourself, this hurts, I feel overwhelming sadness, and I don't know how to move forward. And then maybe a few minutes later you say, this still hurts. So when we acknowledge our emotions, we are more mindful of them. Doing this gives them less power, and once you do it, it becomes easier to put your attention on other things. But you have to keep doing it because emotions, they keep popping up. It's important to acknowledge them. So just like anything else, it takes regular practice.
We're just about at the end of our first hour of I'm Listening, and on behalf of Dr. Whiteside, all our guests, your calls, questions, and stories of hope, we do thank you. Dr. Chris Donahue and Yessie Ortiz will be your guides through hour number 2. Please stay tuned for DJ Khaled, Talinda Bennington, Chicago Blackhawks great Dan Carcillo, Cage the Elephant, Dr. Christine Moutier, Jon Bon Jovi, and Demi Lovato. Please stay tuned for some brief messages from our partners, and thank you for listening.
Welcome back to Hour 2 of I'm Listening, a live 2-hour in-depth conversation on the state of our individual and collective mental health in the days of COVID-19, social change and upheaval, and the events of 2020. Let's hear from some more of our guests who've been very open about their own mental journeys. 2020 ACM Entertainer of the Year, country superstar Thomas Rhett on self-care during COVID-19.
In the beginning, I think this was a shock for everybody, so I kind of reverted a little bit and went more into my phone and more into technology, just trying to stay like in it, if you will. And as more of the time went on, it's like my phone just kind of was like, I don't need that. I started to like actually be present in my home and talk to my family in a more genuine way. And so my wife loves to read. So like, for an hour a day, my wife will go outside and read a book. That's her way to kind of have her self-time. I'll go down to the gym and work out for a little bit and clear my head.
One of the world's most respected electronic music producers of modern times, Deadmau5, mirrors our emotions on social change and the pandemic.
In terms of like just mental well-being, I am getting a little Groundhog Day-ish. I understand there is a global kind of feeling of, I guess what I would describe as shock fatigue, where all this crazy is happening and it's just happening so fast and so hard, and it's just getting more and more absurd every day in some edge cases and stuff like that, where people just are like, what can you do? And honestly, there is something you can do.
Superstar singer-songwriter, musician, actress, artist Jewel has struggled with anxiety attacks from an early age and what she's done to overcome.
When I was homeless in 18, I started to develop exercises that would rewire me. I just started realizing I'm not my thoughts. I'm the observer of my thoughts. And so I continually kept creating these exercises. And so when we went into COVID, me and my kids, who are extremely at risk, already kind of had a skill set built up. We know what to do with stress. We know what to do with uncertainty. We know if we stay present, we'll figure out what the right next move is to help us evolve.
From Grammy Award-winning alternative band X Ambassadors, Sam Nelson Harris talks about having the tough, honest conversations surrounding the social justice movement.
I think about like radical vulnerability and really like being able to collectively as a country and as a people, like allow ourselves to like say, I'm really afraid here. But it's about recognizing that vulnerability, speaking your truth, will lead to a feeling of empowerment, will lead to opening yourself up, and will lead to healing.
Rapper, singer-songwriter, and mental health advocate Waka Flocka Flame talks about cleansing himself of all negative aspects in his mental health journey.
For me, how I dealt with it, I stopped watching, hearing, I'm talking about movies, books, everything. I put nothing but happiness around me. And I just started dealing with it. I started talking about it. Get the things that help you deal with it. Most people that got mental problems and like myself had and suicide thoughts, we never go outside. We stay in the house, confine ourselves to the house. You know what I'm saying? Like, just go outside, bro, take a good walk. And then just start talking about it. And you start learning how many other people go through that same real shit. But that's what I say, man. Just love yourself.
And singer-songwriter, pop superstar Ava Max, whose debut album was #1 internationally on iTunes this week, discusses how she's coping during the COVID-19 crisis.
Again, it depends on the day. Like some days I'm super inspired and some days I can only lay on my bedroom floor like, what am I doing with my life right now? So I try so hard to connect with my fans because I know, I have this platform and I feel so grateful to have this platform, and it makes me excited to connect with them and hopefully, check up on them and see how they're doing around the world.
And now here's the host of I'm Listening Live, Loveline on Radio.com's Channel Q, licensed clinical therapist, educator, and lecturer, Dr. Chris Donahue, and afternoon host on 97.1 AMP Radio in Los Angeles, Yessie Ortiz. Welcome back to I'm Listening.
Welcome back to I'm Listening. I am Yessie Ortiz along with Dr. Chris Donahue. And this hour will continue to raise the level of engagement and conversation around mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And I got to just say that I feel very privileged to share this space with you, Dr. Chris. And I'm, also feeling at the same time very worried and scared because of all the pain that I'm seeing in the world, and even with my close friends and families. And your life, Dr. Chris, is dedicated to the mental health of everyone that you see in your practice, like the conversations you have with other mental health professionals. So we are here trying to reach out to you as well and hear from you. The number here is 1-800-520-9283 if you'd like to call in and chime in. So Dr. Chris, without really trying to water anything down too much, what are you hearing from everyone you talk with? Is there like this heightened anxiety with everything that's going on in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is amplified, right? Like our lives are already in motion, and then you drop it in the context of everything that's happening, right? We have COVID, the pandemic, we're in the social justice movement. Yeah. Earthquakes, wildfires. So everything's amplified, right? But there's a lot of anxiety, and I want to normalize that anxiety. There are things that are happening that are worthy of us having some of that anxiety. But the things I want people to look out for that will identify that maybe you want to get a little more care support around it is ruminating, where you're constantly spinning and lost in your mind and thinking the worst. Difficulties with eating or sleeping. I think those are two very profound signs that maybe your anxiety is getting a little bit worse, and you want to definitely, give some attention to that. Also tension, but for those that might not be identifying with maybe an anxiety disorder, I just want to also normalize that right now there's a lot of exhaustion and fatigue.
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel that all the time. And I thought, is that a form of anxiety? Because there's so many different signs, right? There's so many different things that are looked at and you don't even realize that you are feeling anxiety
That's
and
right.
stress. So are there signs? What are those signs?
Yeah. So, first off, as you said, a lot of us aren't even aware of what's happening. And that's where I like this idea of staying connected with people, because sometimes the most powerful way to know that we're struggling is for someone we love to point it out and to say, it seems like your sleeping's off. It seems like you're eating differently. It seems like you're hyper stressed. Is everything okay? So, I'm normalizing the fatigue, a little bit of brain fog, some exhaustion. But if you're constantly trapped in negative self-talk or negative thoughts and you don't feel like you can break out of that, that is a sign that the anxiety is definitely getting the best of you.
Wow, I definitely feel like I could be better at checking in on my friends and that way, and family members, because but it's difficult sometimes. It's challenging for me to observe that with others when I can't even observe that myself, because your mind and body almost work two different ways.
That's right.
Right? Like you're taught as a young kid to look at sad face emojis, happy face emojis, and be able to kind of, but then there's also, as you get older, confusion, stress, anxiety. And along the way, you kind of lose those pieces.
And there's shame in some of that. I think
Yes.
what I really want people to walk away from today's show is knowing that it's okay to not be okay.
That's right.
It's okay to struggle. We all at some point in our lives are going to need to reach out for some care and support from those around us.
And yes, absolutely. And you can call us here at 1-800-520-9283. We'd love to hear from you and your thoughts and your experiences, especially like Dr. Chris said earlier, so much happening around us with the global pandemic, the justice and equality happening out there, the social justice. And what I really love about you, Dr. Chris, is you start off your conversations with, how is your mental health today, instead of like, how are you?
Yes, because the good old how are you is a little too casual. We kind of brush it off. But when you say to someone, how is your mental health? What you're communicating is, I'm someone who cares. I'm a resource for you. But more importantly, you're also normalizing talking about mental health. And that's what we really need to do. Normalize talking about it and normalize hearing those around us talk about it.
I love how your approach is to that. There's not a lot of people who are that vulnerable to share. They'll just say, I'm good, I'm fine, thank you. But when you stop and really just kind of be still with the person, just say, no, how are you feeling?
That's right.
There's a human touch to it.
Because I think the worst part about not feeling at your best is sometimes the isolation. You feel like you're in it on your own, and that just amplifies and complicates what you're already struggling with.
That's right. We have so many more questions, and we'd love to hear from you. The number here is 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283.
Our first guest is an American DJ, record executive, producer, author, and media personality. When Mental Health America was asked what songs were helpful in treating patients with music therapy, his song, All We Do Is Win, came in at the top of their list. His 12th studio album, Khaled, comes out soon. DJ Khaled spoke with Julia from Chicago's B96 about his message of positivity for everyone during all the strife surrounding COVID-19 and social change.
I feel it's important that, that we always give thanks to God by me saying that we have life. And when you have life, even if you have problems, you have life. That means you can solve your problems, work on things to make things better, and find ways to find happiness because you have life. And once you realize you have life, that should answer a lot of your questions. So you have to appreciate life. And once you appreciate life, that turns into self-love. And when I say self-love, you have to love yourself so you can love others. And when you love yourself, you're going to be able to love others even more. And hopefully that love gets back in return. You know what I'm saying? My job, I don't consider it a job. I make sure my kids is happy every day. So I just make sure they're smiling and laughing and enjoying life, every moment of it. I mean, we the best. I named my brand We the Best for a lot of reasons. I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm saying we the best. Me and you that's on the phone and everybody that's listening to this conversation, we the best. You know what I'm saying? You should wake up every morning saying we the best. Nobody can tell you that you're not the best. You know what I'm saying? And that goes back to mental health. Wake up in the morning and say we the best.
That's
you know what I'm saying?
I love that. I love DJ Khaled's message, We the Best. It's always been one of my favorites, especially just running into him in several events. He's always had that positive vibe to him, that, positive thinking. And it's a lot easier said than done, because he mentioned the only person that no one can tell you that you're not the best. No, but the person that can say that is yourself.
That's right.
And it's not easy to kind of keep that positive thinking. You know, how do we harness that? How do we really do that? Like, how do we?
Such a big question.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so challenging for me
yes,
even, and I feel like I have positive thinking.
Well, one of the things is I think it's important to realize in times like this, you know, we're both honoring all that's happening and there's a lot of difficulty and there's a lot of trauma, but at the same time, we always want to acknowledge that there can be some joy found in the world at the same time. And so I'm telling people to hold both, and that's really difficult. We want to really be honest and vulnerable with what we're struggling with. We don't want to deny that because that will absolutely lead to trauma and further mental health issues. So on one hand, I want people to not always be focused on the bright side or staying happy. If you're not doing well, that's okay. I want you to be vulnerable and let people know I'm not doing well right now. I'm struggling, right?
Yeah.
But I also am telling people that I'm working with my practice, you can also acknowledge at the same time, there's a lot of beautiful things happening around me.
Yeah, I think that you know, for me, somebody, I try to see I lean into gratitude. Gratitude is something that I'm really trying to do more often in my own personal journey, because, you know, there is so much about our lives that this pandemic has just really just interrupted our lives, that leaning into gratitude is what I'm trying to do. Right?
It's a beautiful thing. I tell people to start their day sometimes with a gratitude list.
It's and again, we go back to easier said than done.
Yes.
Do my best to do that. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you just do your best to do that. And if you can, the number here, if you want to give us a call and chime in and share your experiences, is 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283. And then we also have resources that you can visit our website at imlistening.org. And, you know, if you have someone right now in your life, or you yourself are going through a crisis, and you need help immediately, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. You know, we still have some really great artists coming up. We're going to hear from Demi Lovato, Jon Bon Jovi, Brad Schultz from Cage the Elephant. So please, you know, stick around, and we're here to answer your questions, or at least Dr. Chris is here to answer your questions, right, because I get to call him anytime I'd like. And, you know, one of the things that I always kind of realize is I'm looking at my social media page. I see a lot of social media influencers, Dr. Chris, that seem to be just happy.
Yeah,
and like,
right.
This pandemic isn't happening, or social injustice isn't happening. What do you see when you look at them?
I see
they're
people
building a house, or they're
learning
redoing
foreign
their
languages.
remodel. Yes.
Yes. Well, I want to say to those that are not able to ground themselves enough to really focus and do that, that's okay too, right? Some people are thriving. I'm happy for them. Others feel as though they have to present a self that's thriving. But I want to tell people, it's okay right now to do as best as you can. Do 60 or 70%. Drop the bar for yourself. Drop the bar for others around you. You know, we're trying to live our lives in the midst of a pandemic. We're trying to live our lives in the midst of a mental health struggle.
Yeah.
So we can't have the same expectations upon ourselves that we might have formerly, or that others have on them. So lovingly drop the bar for yourself and those around you. I'm telling people, like, 60% is good enough.
But what is, you know, we all have different 60%. We all have different 60, 70%. So if yours is just, you know, getting out of bed, you know,
Well
you got
done.
out of bed. Yes.
That's right.
Well done.
All right, our next guest is the founding partner of 320 Changes Direction, World Health Organization official representative for mental health advocacy, and the widow of Linkin Park lead vocalist Chester Bennington, who was lost to suicide in 2017. I had the pleasure of speaking with Talinda Bennington on numerous occasions, and most recently we talked about whether she's seeing more willingness and openness in discussing the stigma of talking about suicide and mental wellness in 2020, two subjects she's intimately familiar with.
Both, actually. Both of those questions ring very true to me. I think that we've made really great strides in being more open about mental health. I see a lot of it, especially in dialogue on TV shows, which is really great. But, you know, I also think that we still have a long way to go, because it's still something very hard to speak about. It's very personal.
You know, as we continue to, we'll hear some more. We had some audio issues there, but the number here is 1-800-520-9283. You were hearing from Talinda Bennington. And we know that, you know, suicide isn't something very easy to talk about. There's some people who just don't like talking about suicide.
That's right.
It almost feels very shameful for folks. And, this is why we're here working really hard all year round to destigmatize mental health and have these conversations in a safe space.
That's right. Because talking about something doesn't lead to it happening. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Giving people comfort, confidence, and language to talk about their struggles empowers them. It saves lives, right? The more we talk, the more we save lives. And so please get your family, get your friends, get your children familiar with the discussion of mental health. And how we do that is by us talking about ours. I talk about mine publicly on social media, which is hard because it's expected that as a doctor and a therapist that I'm going to always have it together, all's going well. And I do my best, I do my work, but we struggle.
But isn't it true also that most professional mental health professionals also seek professional
100%.
advice? And I mean,
right.
This is what the world that you're in, and mental health is everyone's issue. It's not a lower end issue. It's not, it affects blue collar, white collar, everyone's issue here. And, I know there's been you talk about speaking to the young kids at a really young age and teaching them. And I know you have some statistics about suicide and how it's changed. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it was really disheartening to dig deep into that. Unfortunately, in the past year, the numbers have gone up, right? Yeah. And that is about a 60+% increase. That's massive. And when we look at the hotlines that are there providing resources, they have a 65% increase in phone calls right now.
Wow.
So this year it went up already, but during COVID, it spiked even more. And when you look at that, that's because whatever else people were already struggling with, now everything's amplified. We don't have access to our normal distractions or the things that maybe give us fun and joy in our lives. Yeah. People are burnt out. They're self-isolating while trying to work, and the kids are trying to go to school at the same time. It's a lot at once.
I mean, just hearing you say all of that makes me feel like there is a lot, to even think about. This is I'm Listening, and I'm Yessi Ortiz, along with Dr. Chris Donahue, who hosts I'm Listening Live and is a licensed clinical therapist. Please give us a call. We're here taking your phone calls. We'd love to hear from you. Share your experiences and your story at 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283.
Beautiful. And we have a call. We are going to take a call from Sonia. Hi, Sonia. You're on with Dr. Chris and Yessi Ortiz.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Sonia.
Yeah, this is Sonia.
Hi, how can we help you?
Hi.
Oh,
we lost her? All right.
I have about what's been going on in my life. And I don't know if anybody listening has been through this, but I'm a mom and I went through postpartum depression. And I feel like it's something that is very much brushed under the rug. People don't like to talk about it. People don't even want to admit that they're going through it when they're going through it. It's very hard to find help when you are going through it because, when you become a mom and you're expected to be on top of the world and love your baby and love everything about motherhood. And that's just not the case for everyone. That wasn't the case for me. And so I just wanted to make people aware, that this is something that legitimately happens to people, to new mothers. And, I think mental health in general is so underrated. And people are so careful about not sharing their problems, and I think that we need to work together to remove this taboo in society. And personally, I have been through a 3-year struggle with postpartum depression, which was later diagnosed as bipolar disorder that was induced by postpartum period. So it's been a tough pill to swallow. And, I feel like people need to really think about what they're getting into when they decide to go through motherhood, because it really does change you as a person. And I don't think anybody tells you that when you're going into it,
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty, because you started the call off by saying you want to normalize that, and you're just doing so by talking about your story. But I think that's some of the struggle sometimes is, how can we have a moment in our lives that is such a beautiful, beautiful moment that also can carry some struggles? And some of the mothers I work with in my clinical practice, that's what our work is centering around. How do they both honor the beautiful thing that just happened, but also be honest with what's going on with them in that struggle? And, if we can get help sooner, it doesn't necessarily have to become something more complicated like bipolar disorder.
Yeah. I mean, I just love her bravery for calling in, because, again, going back to what you're saying, just her calling and sharing is part of the work that we try to do to have these conversations and normalize the conversations. One thing that I've known along in my therapy journey is, mental health is just like a physical checkup. You're not shamed for going to the doctor to get your physical annual, checkup. Mental health works the same way.
100%. And I wish that when we talked about health in general, we always included mental health. We tend to overly focus on the physical, but mental health is an invisible struggle. And so it's hard for some people to get the support and to rationalize that because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have more calls?
We absolutely do. We have a great email I'd love to go to.
Absolutely.
This one comes in from Anonymous, and this one says, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder almost 20 years ago. I take medication daily, and I see a therapist regularly. I'm also an emergency room nurse. There's definitely an us and them mentality from my coworkers around my mental illness. So although I'm very open about my mental illness in my private life, I rarely share it with my coworkers for fear of being looked at differently.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that's not uncommon, right? The stigma. What will people think if I come forward with my mental health struggles?
Yeah.
They might think I'm broken, I'm defective, I'm weak. And as you said, Yessie, earlier, which was beautiful, it hits all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, there was this fear growing up being Latina, black and brown communities there's this, like, what's wrong with you? What, you can't solve your own problems? That stigma was very real, and growing up, the shame stuck with me because I couldn't handle it by myself. I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't fix myself. And that's hard. It's hurtful. It's hurtful, and you live with a lot of guilt growing up and shame growing up. And, if you wouldn't mind sharing what your thoughts on how someone might be thinking the same, what kind of approach would you give them?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is, again, keeping things secret and to yourself not only complicates, but also maintains shame. And the way we work through any level of shame is to start to kind of expose and dialogue about those parts with others, right? And so you want to build community.
Yeah.
Right? Community is so important, especially those that are struggling with what you're struggling with. It reflects back that it's okay and we're here for you. So that's the first thing I always say. Build community. Get some support so you don't feel like you're alone. And then number two, you find the people that you feel safe and trust, and you start to practice discussing and being vulnerable.
Yeah. I can definitely try. I definitely have tried to create my community. And though I see also like my close friends and families, some doing well, others not. We're still in a pandemic.
Oh, yes. And also we have to look at
still in a pandemic.
All the other intersecting parts of our identities. If you're a black person, a person of color right now, or even a gay person in our homophobic culture, we talk about toxic masculinity and the pressure that puts on people that are male identified. All of that is woven into whatever your mental health struggles are, right? And so it amplifies.
It's really hard sometimes, and you're definitely not alone. The number here is 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283.
Beautiful. And we have another caller. This one is coming in from Angela. Hi, Angela. You're on with Dr. Chris and Yessie. How are you?
Hi. I am doing okay. I just am trying to get through every day, it seems like every day is just a struggle at this point. But it's just like you have to keep on keeping on, I guess. I lost my job because of the COVID pandemic, and I've been trying to adjust to becoming a housewife, something I never thought I would be. So it's very interesting, but it's just been more anxiety. I had anxiety when I was in my everyday normal life, but now it feels like the world is ending every couple of weeks, and it's just stressful. But I've just tried to keep stay in mind, repaint every room in my house, do puzzles, crochet, spend time with my dog, like everything, just trying to avoid depression and anxiety attacks.
I want to applaud you because, you know, it sounds like you're taking advantage of all that's possible and available to you. And that's what we have to talk about is we want to make use of what we have around us. And one of the number one things you called out that I think is really important is distractions. It is okay to find distractions. We need moments away from the news, social media, and conversations that are bringing up and spiking our anxiety of all the things that are happening around us. So that anxiety is best dealt with by taking a break from all of those factors. And one of the things I want everyone listening to know is right now, every single day, I want us all to be focusing on self-care, finding moments of joy, and also resting.
Yeah, I think being still is really challenging and difficult sometimes. You say self-care is very important. I have challenges with self-care. And again, to Angela, you know, she's doing the distractions and trying to find something to keep her from having an anxiety attack or panic attack. And I know people can say there's breathing exercises you can do, but I like the idea that she's doing like the crafting and sometimes just resting, being still, playing video games, if that's what you need to do. I mean, my fiance does that. He plays video games to kind of give himself a break, and that's okay too. You know, that's okay too, because there's a lot going on. And we heard the news today about Breonna Taylor and the results of that. And I know there's a lot of people hurting and there's a lot of pain right now. And there's going to continue to be more. We just lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And, you know, we have so many people mourning, and grief is another thing too.
That's right.
So we have the number here at 1-800-520-9283 if you'd like to call us. And if you are in crisis or know someone that needs some help, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255.
All right, our next guest played the National Hockey League for 9 years. He's a two-time Stanley Cup winner with the Chicago Blackhawks, but left the NHL with a variety of challenges, but is now a staunch advocate for mental health. He's the founder of Made Plan Health and helps former players suffering with their own mental health issues. Dan Carcillo own issues go back to his junior hockey days, which he discussed with David Hoff from Sports Radio 670 The Score in Chicago.
In looking back on my career, I mean, I know why and how this all happened now. I went through a really traumatic year in junior hockey when I was a minor, and we got physically, sexually, verbally abused for the better part of the season. By coaches, by our own teammates. And I did an article for the Washington Post, and my old coach, who I came up with in minor hockey, said something really telling, that I was never that player. And he didn't understand where this car bomb persona came from, but nobody knew about the abuse. You know, I really changed throughout my career when, thank gosh, that I had that opiate addiction at 25 with these doctors just walking up and down the plains, feeding us pills without any education on the repercussions of it, because that really introduced me to spirituality. And I came to a point where after I blew out my ACL, I had to make a decision, because the writing was kind of on the wall that I was on my way out of the league if I didn't change who I was as a teammate and a person. And so I was able to, within my career, ask for help. That's the biggest thing that changed my life, is that I looked in the mirror, I took a hard look, and realized that this wasn't working for me, and either I was going to be in the grave, out of the league, or I was going to get better. I think the more that we tell our stories, the more people then can recognize signs and symptoms within themselves. So the more we talk about those two things, I think the more people will recognize signs that are affecting their quality of life, relationships, job, and then be able to enact change and try some of these different modalities.
Dan Carcillo's story is certainly one of recovery and redemption, and he embodies the internal struggles a lot of people are going through. Now, the fact that he could finally pinpoint when and where his battle with mental health started is really, really, really impressive, and it could have had a tragic outcome, but Dan's an example of reminding us that there's always hope and there's always help, and that's really important. And if you feel like you're not being heard, please, please keep talking and keep looking for the help you need to deal with the struggles you're currently enduring. Our next guest is the guitarist and founding member of the Grammy award-winning band Cage the Elephant. Their current album, Social Cues, like their work before, is a reflection of what's going on in their lives, and prioritizing their mental health was front and center. Brad Schultz spent some time with Christine from New York's Alt 92.3, and they spoke about the struggles surrounding the social equality movement, COVID-19, and the impact he's experienced.
I think that the biggest, well, I can't say the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things that I've learned is just the way the human mind compiles information and processes that information, and then the way that that information either builds positive aspects of you or negative aspects of you. And you can see it in a child in real time. And it's mind-blowing.
When I was growing up, I don't think I really had any kind of emotional tools or vocabulary to really process conflict or big emotions. And it's so important to me now to model better behavior for my children so that they know they have a safe place to be able to work through those kind of feelings.
Yeah. Another thing I just thought about, I learned through my daughter, is one of the biggest blessings that happened to us that we did was we put our daughter in this great Montessori school. Part of their whole makeup is, social interaction, the way you process things. And they have something that's called a peace table. And so when two kids get in an argument or in a disagreement, they have to sit at that table, and there's certain rules. There's like a thing that you pass back and forth to the person who is the speaker at that point. And then the other person listens as that person talks. And it's so crazy that, it's that simple. And so like seeing my daughter, she built a peace table in her room when she was mad at me. And she said, "Dad, I want you to come into the room and sit at the peace table with me."
And did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And she, it was such a sweet moment, and it taught me so much that I can't even verbalize, just in that certain moment.
Wow. So once again, this is I'm Listening. Still to come, Jon Bon Jovi and Demi Lovato. Brad from Cage the Elephant echoes what a lot of people are thinking regarding social justice and change in America and the world. Like, the focus is really about the emotions that people carry and how it can go beyond everyday stresses and anxiety. So, for example, there's every action, there is a reaction. We've heard the news today about Breonna Taylor, so there's a reaction of emotions there. And though this isn't about politics, we know that politics and things like the pandemic can really affect how we react to things, aka our emotions. So, how do we and it's hard to do for some people, by the way, to speak about our emotions. So how are some ways, Dr. Chris, that we can be better engaged and just start the tough conversations about mental health?
Yeah, tough is a good word, because for a lot of people, it's very difficult. They're not familiar with talking about mental health, hearing about it, or that kind of vulnerability. First off, ask openly. Again, don't be afraid if there's someone in your life that you care about that seems like they're struggling, to say, how is your mental health right now, right? Yeah. So I want to go back to that. Ask openly and ask directly. Also, listen. Don't try to fix everything. Sometimes what people need is just someone to be in it with them. They're not always needing an immediate solution or even one at all. Yep. They just want to know that they're not alone, right? Because isolation makes it harder. So just be present and just listen, and don't always try to swoop in and fix.
And I just got to say, it's okay also if you don't know how to articulate those emotions just yet. I know, sometimes there's this pain in your throat, and you choose to push that pain down versus vocalizing it or verbalizing what you're feeling. But there is power to talking. And, that's what we're here for. Talk has the power to save lives, to change lives, to open our eyes. And I hope that everyone listening knows that they are not alone. Mental health does affect so many of us. No one is immune from this. The number here is 1-800-520-9283 if you'd like to give us a shout. But we do have Dr. Chris, who is an amazing clinical therapist who always is so welcoming with his support. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, thank you for
personally.
That. And that's a great segue right into our next guest. She's testified before Congress on suicide prevention, presented to the White House, and has spoken at the National Academy of Sciences. After losing colleagues to suicide, she dedicated herself to fighting this leading cause of death. Dr. Christine Moutier is the Chief Medical Officer advisor for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and I had the honor of speaking with Dr. Moutier for I'm Listening. She talked about the impact of the mental health struggles and fatigue exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the social justice movement.
Every person is a human being, no matter what their, fancy titles, education, pedigree, it doesn't matter. We are at the core of it. We're human. We have our physical health and we have our mental health and other things too. Of course, our social health and spiritual health. And all of those things live on a continuum, but we can shape it in some ways. Genetics is not our destiny, as is the case for physical health. Same is true for mental health.
And what would you recommend? What are some of the things that you believe people can do to build up this buzzword we love right now, resilience?
Yes. I think it is a matter of knowing yourself and actually starting to pay attention to sort of how you tick. What are the things that fill up our resilience sort of coping reservoir? And what are the things that tend to be, really kind of toxic influences in your life, and make some decisions accordingly? And that's on a baseline of we all as human beings need adequate sleep, nutrition, hydration, keep alcohol intake lower, as low as possible, monitor your media consumption, but it's also about relationships and toxicity and stress management. All of those things are, pick one or two of them to start. You don't have to, perfection is not what you're aiming for, but just taking baby steps. Anything you feel like, maybe it's going to bed a little earlier, setting a schedule for yourself during the day. Breathing exercises are a big one actually for me, along with regular exercise. But even just reminding yourself when you get in a state of starting to feel kind of overwhelmed, to take a step back and breathe and realize that even though there are things that are outside our control, there are also things that we can control. And those tend to be things like, okay, what time can I go to bed tonight? Who can I talk to who is a trustworthy person in my life? Little things like that. I think they actually go a long, long way to shoring up our resilience.
Wow, that was really well said. Let's go to the phone lines. We have Debbie on the line. Debbie, you're on with Dr. Chris and Yessie. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you today?
We're doing well. How can we help you?
Well, I was on hold to talk, but I'm not sure. Do you have questions?
We'd love to hear your story about your son.
Okay. Well, my husband and my son both completed suicide.
Oh.
And my husband was in 1989. My son was in 2000. And back in 1989, depression was not even a thing. Nobody really knew what it was, and so the signs and symptoms that were there were not brought out, or people didn't know what they were or talk about them. And, I grew up in kind of the country, so everybody hid their feelings quite a bit. And then I was told that as long as you make sure your son has a physical every year and you keep him intact and make sure he's doing okay, and everything will be fine. He'll be okay. So we did go through some counseling to begin with, and I remember a doctor telling me, well, we done all the tests, we did everything we needed to do neurologically, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I was good. Everything's going to be fine. And then when my son turned 14, he exhibited lots of behaviors, and they were not good behaviors. They were not extremely bad, but he never did any drugs or anything like that. But he was a captain of a football team and captain of the soccer team, and just well liked and did well in school.
And Debbie,
And
that's the
so
thing.
it
I
just-
think, unfortunately, some people assume that if someone's a high achiever, that their mental health might be okay. And often that's not the case. People that are high functioning or high achievers are really good at masking that. And I'm sorry that mental health wasn't acknowledged, not so much back then. And we're still struggling now in our current system to know that total health means checking in on mental health.
Absolutely. And, you know, the power in words, too. She mentioned, she said completed suicide. The power in words. You know, there's a reason why the word committed suicide is no longer used.
Right.
And you could probably say more on that.
Yeah, we want to make sure, I mean, the way we frame it now is death by suicide. And that's both to honor that the person had a struggle. The history, unfortunately, of suicidality was that it was illegal and people were taking it from a legal perspective. And now we talk about, again, death by suicide. And it's really important that we're always adding to that conversation that there are other options. Right. And so we want to always be talking about suicide around the help that can be sought out, resources, because someone that's struggling in that way is really struggling to find a world that they want to be a part of. And they often feel alone in those struggles. And so, like Yessie said, words have power. Let's keep using the right words and let's keep talking about this.
Absolutely. The number here is 1-800-520-9283.
All right, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is an amazing resource. We are going to go to an email. This is from Diane, and this one says, my brother Eric appeared to be okay, although I worried. Something was bothering me about his well-being. He never told me or his friends how he was feeling. I just had a nagging feeling. I asked him if he was okay. He assured me he was, and I knew I cared about him. One morning, I couldn't get an answer on the phone, so I went over to check on him. But it was too late. I had arrived too late. I was devastated, to say the least. I will always feel that I could have saved him, always wondering if he needed me, and I let him down. I will never get over his death and the sadness that he left me with. If you think someone may be thinking of suicide, ask them. I wish I had. And that's a beautiful example where this individual was struggling in silence, but yet had tons of people around him that cared about him.
Yeah.
But they weren't talking about mental health.
And that's hard because you go back to saying it's masked. You know, sometimes you don't know. And you can always ask your strong friend if it looks like your friend or your loved one feels like it's all getting to, you know, has it all together. It's okay to just stop and ask, how is your mental health? Are you getting enough rest? Are you eating well? Are you, taking care of yourself, doing some things to help you, de-stress? Those are, I think, important conversations that we can continue to have.
Yes, absolutely. And I ask everyone in my life that as frequently as possible, even if I don't think they're struggling. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is an amazing resource. The work and research they do in helping to uncover, understand, and prevent suicide is tireless work. I urge all of you, if you want to know more about how your mental health and wellness is a direct correlation to suicidal ideation, please visit afsp.org. And please know, if you're in crisis right now or you know someone who is, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 800-273-8255.
We're here to answer your phone calls, listening to your journey, share your experiences. Again, there's power in conversation, power in talk, and and you're not alone. You are not alone. It's a conversation that we want to have with you. We want to hear from you. The number here is 1-800-520-9283. That's 1-800-520-9283.
All right. Our next guest barely needs an introduction. Oh, we're going to go to the phone first.
Oh,
that phone line. Sorry, I keep not noticing these phone lines. All right. Now let's go to Evie. Evie, you're on with Dr. Chris and Yessie. How are you?
Just wonderful. How you doing?
Great. Good to hear from you. How can we help you?
No, I was telling the lady that I work in the hospital. And one of the things I have hard time dealing with is with my patients. Sometimes I have to I know that they're going to die. At the same time, I have hard time see when this happens and the family is not there and they are alone. And That is really hard because you are the one is there. You are the one who wants to protect them, let them know that they were not alone, but they are alone. I have a mother, and every time I go there, I'm afraid to go to my house and kiss my mother because
That's really. I'm sorry. Continue.
I'm afraid that I'll be the one who made my mother sick, so I try to stay away from her. But I see this family and it hurts.
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of people can maybe relate to is we're trying to run our lives with business as usual, but in the middle of a pandemic, there's that heightened risk of possibly also infecting those around us that we love. I can't imagine working around that much grief and loss.
It almost feels like you have lost.
Yeah.
You're almost reliving a grief. You're reliving it, and I hear it in her voice. I mean, I got choked up, tearing up, thinking about what she has to go through, what a lot of our frontline workers and essential workers have to go through in the middle of this pandemic, and with everything else, more than just what's for dinner.
Yeah, and that's the thing right now is we're doing the best we can with what we have access to and available. I can't wait for the pandemic to wind itself down because it's just amplifying everything and putting more pressure on everything else we're struggling with. But I want to thank people like Evie and all the other frontline workers that are doing the difficult work that's so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The number here is 1-800-520-9283. You are definitely not alone, and we can't thank you enough so much for all those phone calls that we've gotten so far and emails as well.
Yeah, and we have an email that came in from Cynthia. Cynthia writes, "My son was 19 when he died by suicide. He was diagnosed with major depressive disorder when he hit puberty at 14 years old. He did everything they told him to do: counseling, medication, group therapy. He wanted to be well. He fought to be happy. He grew up in a loving, happy home. However, his father also had depression and deals with PTSD from tours in Afghanistan. I don't know what else to say. I'm just overwhelmed, but I want to point out that mental health and suicide prevention need to become a priority."
Absolutely.
It's so true, and that's what we're trying to do here is remind everyone that this is something we need to talk more about, but also explore and look into. And sometimes we have to be our own advocate, and when we're getting a mental health checkup, when we're getting a normal checkup to say, how about my mental health?
Yes. I mean, I speak to that with my doctor. I'm constantly telling her about how, and do the research. It's okay to do the research, and if the right therapist is also something that is going to help with that. And I think there might be some. Maybe do you have some tips to give for someone who's looking for the right therapist? How do we approach finding a therapist that's right for me?
It's such an important question because that relationship is going to be very valuable. And for some people, it's the only lifeline they have. So I want to start by saying that never think that you don't have a right to therapy. Some people think their issues aren't big enough or important enough. Oh, they are. Whatever you're struggling with, a therapist is there to help you. And we're in a time now where you can find a therapist that might meet the identity you're looking for. Some people that are gay might want a gay therapist. Some people that are black want a therapist that's also black. And I think that can be very valuable. So there's a lot of resources, but what I really generally recommend is ask people who you trust that are in therapy. Referrals are a great way to go because someone else has had a good experience with them. And if that doesn't work, there's a lot of local resources, and we're going to give you some numbers, but there's always a lot of local resources that have sliding scale. So please don't think that it's something you can't afford. There is sliding scale therapy, which means it's a cheaper fee, and there's also free therapy. So please reach out and find someone.
And the resources, the number to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if you know someone that's in crisis or you might need that extra help, the number is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255.
All right, our next guest barely needs an introduction. He and his band have sold over 130 million albums worldwide and are one of the top touring bands of all time with nearly 10 million tickets sold in just the last decade alone. Their 15th studio album comes out October 2nd and includes the single Do What You Can, inspired and influenced directly by the coronavirus pandemic. Of course, we're talking about Jon Bon Jovi. Jon has felt the direct impact of COVID-19 through members of his family and his band. Morning host Karen Carson on the new 1027 in New York spoke with Jon and asked him about the mental health impact of COVID on him.
It's been an interesting time because we all had to sort of stop running on the treadmill. We all had to stop chasing things just for the sake of chasing them. I think that I know, at least I was guilty of work, run. Where do I got to go? What do I got to do? How can I do it better? And the pandemic forced us all to reevaluate life and what that meant. So there's a new simplicity and complexity. And, you know, for some, it's been a peaceful time. Others, granted, that have lost a loved one or lost a job. There's a lot of turmoil in it. But in another way, it's also helped us define that after we breathe in and breathe out, everything else is just lucky that we're lucky to have it.
Yeah. Jon Bon Jovi makes some really valid observations. You know, from the start of the pandemic, we were all forced to just be still. And for some folks, it was like, how do I be still? You know, you're on this go. I've never really realized how to be still. And for others, it was like, why do I have to? I need to move. I need to get out and go about. And then you have the wildfires and the earthquakes and the social injustice, all different experiences. But are they the form of the same type of trauma? Are they still a form of trauma?
Yeah.
Though different experiences, are they a form of trauma?
Just sitting here, feeling in my body the impact when you listed everything that's going around.
I know.
You know, it really normalizes that. But yeah, absolutely. You know, we are going through something that's going to wind up being somewhat of a global trauma. For the first time, I think it's a great equalizer, and we're all in this struggle together.
Yeah.
But the way we're going to come out of it as the most resilient and robust in terms of our mental health is by focusing on our mental health, right? Talk about it, seek resources. And right now, prioritize some rest, prioritize distraction, prioritize fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how we're going to let our nervous systems and our overworked psyches, let them cool down a little bit and rest and heal.
And I hear all that, you know, I get that, but sometimes I just, you know, I want to know and be informed, not just as a radio host, but as a human being, but I also want to pull away from everything, you know, and it's challenging. So what would you say there are some simple steps to help everyone listening kind of get through all of that?
Feel okay leaning out a little bit. And times like this, when we feel out of control and powerless, we want to assert more control by being a minute by minute aware of what's happening. Back away from that. Turn off the television, put your phone down, take time away, right? So it's okay to lean away. We don't normally say that. Also, focus on the things that are really valuable and meaningful to you. Connect with family. It's all about collectivity. It's all about community. Right? What I want us to come out of this refocused or really prioritizing is how we impact others and how disconnected we might have been from others. So reconnect with some people. You know that friend you've been wondering about? Call them. That person you've wanted to get closer to? Call them. So the answer is stay as connected as possible while staying disconnected as possible from all the news and everything that's going around.
I'm definitely writing my notes. There's no doubt that our last guest is no stranger to the spotlight, nor is she. So like so many of us, immune to the battle with her own mental health struggles. We have Demi Lovato coming up.
So true. She's had mad success in her music career. She's a global superstar with over 18 billion streams, 16 platinum or multi-platinum singles. Her latest single, Okay to Not Be Okay, is a reflection of her own journey to recovery, and she partnered with the nonprofit organization Hope for the Day, whose focus is suicide prevention. Demi Lovato is uniquely and personally affected by mental health struggles, and we had the chance to ask her how she's coping during the COVID crisis and how she's maneuvering this important time in social justice and equality.
I'm meditating a lot. I am meditating almost every chance that I get. And whether it's like in between breaks on set, or it's starting my day or falling asleep at night, meditation has become key to me. Also just taking care of myself in other ways, making sure I get rest, doing things for my immune system, staying healthy, things like that. It's really important for me to stay positive and centered, because if I don't stay positive and centered, it can get really messy really quick. And, you know, it's just important that we all keep a positive headspace. I don't know, I want to have a positive environment around me at all times. The ways that I'm responding and helping during this current cultural call to action is I want to remind everybody and use my platform to say that silence equals violence, that when we are not standing up for oppressed people in our societies, we are doing the same as harming them. And so we need to use our voices. Anybody that has a platform, we need to use our voice to stick up for the people that don't have as loud of a voice as we do.
I think the struggles that Demi Lovato has gone through and her stance on using her tools to constantly check in with herself mirror a lot of what people are going through and what I want people to be focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, she has always been someone that I've looked to and been really proud of to know that she has a platform. You know, she said the platform that she uses that to talk about mental health. I've always been proud of that about someone like Demi Lovato, not being ashamed to talk about it. And she's been through a lot, she's been through a lot. And not all of us are Demi Lovato. And I understand that sometimes it's challenging to talk, but there is power in conversation. There is power in talk. And, again, we go back to, we had a little conversation about therapy and your approach to therapy. But what is your advice if someone is feeling unsure or maybe just put off by the idea of therapy? Like, that's not for me. Yeah. That is not for me. People are turned to, meditation. She talked about meditation and that's great. And are there other things, other tools if therapy isn't for someone?
I'm also very thankful that people like her that have a big platform are normalizing getting into therapy, right? Because that's kind of how it can happen sometimes is top down. The athlete, the comedian or the singer that you love and you value, they're accessing these resources. It makes it okay for you as well. So I want to tell everyone, when in doubt, reach out. When in doubt, reach out, schedule an appointment, get a therapist. And we want to normalize that therapy is for everyone. It's not for people that are broken or are struggling. And in fact, those that have the courage to enter therapy are the people that are strong and courageous, because it's really difficult for some people in our culture to take that step. And so I'm proud of people that do that. But like I said, when in doubt, reach out, do it, take that step.
Yeah, take that step. The number to the crisis, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if you are in crisis or know someone, is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. You can find also some resources and the podcast of today's show of imlistening.org or radio.com. Talk has the power to save lives. It just does.
It absolutely does. And it's okay to not be okay. So keep asking people, how is your mental health?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And just want to quickly say on behalf of BJ, Shea, Dr. Ursula Whiteside, myself, Dr. Chris, thank you so much. We are internally grateful for your time and your contributions. We have a lot of hard work and healing to do, but, your engagement, your honesty, your desire to share your stories. Thank you for calling us, Dr. Chris. You are amazing. And for those listening, you are not alone. There are 7 billion or so souls inhabiting this planet,
Take care of each other. Thank you so much.